on a stormy night, the kind that blankets the world in a symphony of rain and thunder, I found myself tucked away in my cozy living room, savoring the ambience. Storms like this, with their rolling thunder and relentless rain, always brought me a strange sense of comfort, a reason to stay indoors and indulge in the simple pleasures of life. With no work the next day, I decided to make the most of it. At around 8 p.m., I brewed a steaming cup of coffee, its rich aroma filling the air, and settled onto the couch with a movie playing on the TV. The rain battered the windows, a soothing backdrop to the flickering screen. Only 20 minutes into the film, my phone buzzed to life, its ring cutting through the cozy haze. The number wasn't saved in my contacts, but the area code was local, so I answered, thinking it might be someone I knew or something urgent. "Hello," I said, my voice tentative. Silence greeted me, but it wasn't empty. There was a faint, chaotic noise in the background, like the storm itself was bleeding through the line. "Can I help you?" I tried again, but no one spoke. The call wasn't dead. I could hear the rain, the wind, almost as if the caller was standing outside in the tempest. Uneasy, I hung up, dismissing it as a prank or a scam, though it lacked the telltale robotic voice of automated calls. Shaking off the odd feeling, I tossed the phone onto the end table and returned to my movie. The storm outside grew fiercer as the night wore on, the thunder booming louder, the lightning flashing brighter, and the rain pounding harder against the house. About an hour into the movie, the lights and TV flickered, a brief stutter before snapping back on. I paused the film, glancing around, unsure what had caused the disruption. Then, not even 30 seconds later, the power cut out completely. The house plunged into darkness, and the storm's roar seemed to double in intensity, filling the silence left by the dead electronics. Rain hammered the roof, and thunder rumbled relentlessly, shaking the walls for what felt like an eternity. I had only a small, rarely used candle to light the room, and I was hesitant to use my phone's flashlight, wary of draining its battery during what could be a long outage. I lit the candle, its weak flame casting eerie shadows, and decided to check the breaker box in the basement. The switch was loose when I found it, but flipping it back and forth did nothing. The power was gone. Returning upstairs, I noticed every house on the street was dark, confirming a widespread outage. With my phone running on 5G, I searched for any news about the blackout, but found nothing. Standing by the window, I watched the storm rage, the candle's faint glow reflecting off the glass. I'd been there for about 15 minutes, mesmerized by the chaos outside, when a sharp creak cut through the noise, the unmistakable sound of my backyard gate swinging open. That gate had no lock, but it was heavy and never opened on its own, even in strong winds. My heart quickened as I moved to the back door, peering through the glass into the stormy darkness. There, in the middle of my backyard, stood the shadowy outline of a man, barely visible through the rain. I couldn't tell if he was facing the house or looking away, his features obscured by the storm's veil. A chill ran through me. Who would be out in this weather, standing motionless in my yard? I considered shouting at him to leave, but something about his stillness, his presence in the storm, made me hesitate. What if he was dangerous? I stayed by the door, watching, my breath shallow. For a full minute, he didn't move. Then, slowly, he raised his arm, pulling something from his pocket. A faint glow appeared in his hand, a phone. My heart stopped as my own phone began ringing in the living room, the same unfamiliar number flashing on the screen. I rushed to grab it, confirming it was the same caller from earlier. The realization hit me like a bolt of lightning. This man, standing in my backyard, had called me an hour ago, the storm's noise crackling through the line. Had he been out there this whole time, watching my house? Panic surged through me as I returned to the back door, but he was gone, swallowed by the darkness. I cursed myself for leaving the door, for losing sight of him. The thought of him lurking unseen made my skin crawl. I retreated to the living room, trying to calm my racing heart. I considered calling the police, but what could I say? Someone was in my yard and called me twice, but I had no proof they meant harm. Before I could decide, my phone rang again, the same number. I declined it, my hands trembling. Seconds later, a loud knock shook the front door, heavy, deliberate blows that rattled the walls. The phone rang again, and the knocking grew more aggressive, each thud echoing through the house. Fear paralyzed me. I knew I should act, but the storm, the darkness, and the relentless pounding overwhelmed me. It wasn't until the knocks became even more forceful that I snapped out of it and dialed 911, my voice shaky as I explained the situation to the operator. They assured me an officer was 4 minutes away. The knocking continued, unrelenting, as I waited, each second stretching into eternity. Finally, the operator said the officer was on my street. I heard shouting outside and rushed to the window, just in time to see a police officer chasing a figure into the storm. They vanished into the darkness, and I waited, heart pounding, until the officer returned, alone. The man had escaped. The police took the situation seriously, especially since the officer had seen the suspect. They investigated thoroughly, but the phone number led nowhere, a dead end. I racked my brain for anyone who might have a grudge against me, but came up empty. The case eventually fizzled out, and I never heard from that number again. The terror of that night, though, has never left me. It's the kind of fear you think only exists in movies, the kind that shatters your sense of safety. I was young then, in middle school, just starting to feel like I was growing into myself, but that night made me feel small and vulnerable again. Years later, another unsettling experience deepened that lingering unease. It was summer, and my parents had left for a short road trip to celebrate their anniversary, leaving me alone in the house. I was thrilled at the prospect of having the place to myself, inviting my best friend, Jake, over for a sleepover. His parents wouldn't have allowed it if they knew no adults were home, so we bent the truth a little, and by 6 p.m., Jake was on his way. Excited, I opened the front windows to watch for his arrival, but as I did, I noticed a man standing unusually close to the house, near the garage. He was tall and thin, with longish dark hair and a patchy beard, his presence unnerving. I stepped back from the window, not wanting him to see me, and when I checked again a few minutes later, he was gone. I brushed it off, assuming he was just passing by, and didn't mention it to Jake when he arrived. We spent the evening locked in my room, playing video games, munching on snacks, and losing track of time. Around 11:30 p.m., Jake stepped out to use the bathroom, only to return seconds later, his face pale. "Did you hear that?" he whispered. I hadn't heard anything, but before he could explain, the power went out. The TV, Xbox, and lights all died, plunging the house into darkness so complete I couldn't see Jake standing just feet away. Groping for my phone, I turned on the flashlight, its beam cutting through the blackness. We stood still, listening, trying to make sense of the sudden blackout. Jake said he'd heard a thump or footsteps downstairs just before the power cut. We assumed it was related to the outage, but the timing fell off, and the darkness made everything more ominous. Not knowing what else to do, we decided to check the breaker box in the basement. I led Jake to the basement door, which was oddly already open. My parents rarely went down there. It was unfinished, filled with old boxes and forgotten junk, so the open door added to our unease. With our phone flashlights guiding us, we descended the creaky wooden stairs into the cold, concrete space. The breaker box's panel was partially open, and the main switch was flipped opposite the others. Jake hesitated, then flipped it back. Instantly, faint beeps and hums echoed from upstairs as appliances restarted, but the basement remained pitch black. We started back toward the stairs, but a sudden shuffling sound stopped us cold. I swung my flashlight toward the noise, and there, half hidden behind some boxes, stood a figure, tall, thin, with long dark hair. It was the man I'd seen earlier near the garage. Panic seized me. I turned and bolted up the stairs, Jake right behind me. We slammed the basement door shut and ran out the front door, across the street, where I called 911. As we waited, we saw a figure move past the downstairs window, then, chillingly, an upstairs one, my parents' room. The police arrived quickly, but the man was gone, having slipped out a back window. My parents were called, and though the police asked countless questions, the investigation led nowhere. The thought of that man watching our house, shutting off the power, and hiding in the basement still haunts me. We moved shortly after, and I've never seen him again, but the fear lingers, a reminder of how fragile safety can be. Decades later, I bought an off-grid cabin in the Montana wilderness, craving solitude. It was a perfect retreat, 3 hours from civilization, surrounded by dense forest. One fall, I decided on a whim to spend a 5-day weekend there. The drive was exhausting, and I arrived around 7 p.m., navigating the long dirt road in the dark. I unloaded my bag, started the gas generator, and lit the wood stove to ward off the chilly 25 degrees Fahrenheit night. Too tired to do much, I went to bed early. The next day, I cleaned the cabin, dusting and sealing cracks. Around midday, I noticed an old truck creeping down the dirt trail toward the cabin. It stopped short, idled for 5 minutes, and then turned back. I figured they'd taken a wrong turn. Other cabins were scattered nearby, so I didn't dwell on it. That night, around 10 o'clock, I lit a campfire on the porch, enjoying the quiet forest sounds and the glow of the flames. But the peace didn't last. The porch light flickered and died, along with the cabin's lights. The generator's hum had stopped. Annoyed, I checked it, expecting a malfunction, but found the gas tank empty. I'd filled it the night before, and there was no way it had run dry so quickly. No leaks, no spills, just gone. Confused but resigned, I returned to the campfire, trying to recapture the night's calm. Then, out in the woods, I saw something, a dark, human-like shape among the trees. I squinted, unsure if it was a person or just a strangely shaped bush. It didn't move, so I dismissed it and went back to staring at the fire. But when I glanced again, it was gone. My heart raced. The forest quiet now felt oppressive, like I was being watched. I scanned the trees for 30 minutes, every rustle amplifying my unease. Around midnight, a sharp snap, like a stick falling, came from my left. I stared into the darkness, seeing nothing. Then, looking back toward the trail, I froze. The figure was back, joined by others, maybe a dozen, standing motionless among the trees, facing the cabin. My body screamed to run. I bolted inside, locking the door, my mind racing. Footsteps approached the cabin, slow and deliberate, circling to the porch. I held my breath, listening to their boots thud against the wood. They didn't speak, didn't make a sound beyond their steps, moving with eerie coordination. I stood frozen, expecting them to break in, but they just waited, silent, for 10 agonizing minutes. Finally, I crept to the window and peeked through a sliver of the blind. The porch was empty. They were gone, without a trace. I grabbed my car keys and fled, driving down the dirt road, half expecting an ambush. But the forest was empty, and I made it to town. I haven't returned to the cabin since, though I know I'll have to eventually. The thought terrifies me. Who were those people? Why drain my generator and stock my cabin, only to vanish? I have no answers, just questions that keep me up at night. If you're as gripped by these chilling experiences as I am, please subscribe, comment, and like this video to join the conversation and hear more stories like these. Your support means the world and keeps these tales alive. Thank you so much for watching. Your time and engagement truly make a difference, and I hope you'll stick around for more. Stay safe out there.